This is a live stream by Freedom Media WA. This stream is going to take a different look at trends and patterns regarding implemented legislation purported to be necessary to manage the pandemic. As a disclaimer, I'll say that it needs to be remembered that not all trends should be taken literally. It's also important to remember that trending, forecasting and the like takes practice and understanding of how everything and anything could influence mindset towards what you believe future predictions may or may not come to fruition. Last month in Western Australia, an extremely draconian piece and vague legislation was rammed through the WA Parliament by Premier Mark McGowan, namely the Emergency Management Amendment COVID-19 Response Act 2020. Now, there's already been much said about that bill, which was assented October 21 this year, and I'm not looking to go into that. You can look through previous streams on this platform or YouTube or Rumble Freedom Media WA that covers that piece of legislation. The conversation point I'm seeking to raise is this. What if it was possible, looking at certain trends, to predict that this draconian piece of legislation may have come up? I'm not looking to explain the link of the UK with Australia, but at its core, it's one that was established via colonisation. However, one link that still stands today is Australia is still running to the Westminster parliamentary system. We know now that the UK was one of the first nations in the world to roll out COVID mRNA injections and mask mandates, and was one of the first democratic nations to implement lockdowns. The trend of public dissent against the UK government for withholding clinical data, big pharma contract details, and government health advice, which was relied upon, that saw injection mandates and what is clear now, devastating social and economic lockdowns, saw similar protests in Australia, all for the same reasons, with the comparison trend approximately a 3-month lag from the UK to Australia. Let's take a look for comparison how pandemic measures by the UK government escalated, as did resultant protest actions.
Good evening. The coronavirus is the biggest threat this country has faced for decades, and this country is not alone. And so tonight, I want to update you on the latest steps we're taking to fight the disease. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. You should not be meeting friends. If your friends ask you to meet, you should say no. You should not be meeting family members who do not live in your home. You should not be going shopping except for essentials like food and medicine. And you should do this as little as you can. If you don't follow the rules, the police will have the powers to enforce them, including through fines and dispersing gatherings. We will immediately close all shops selling non-essential goods, including clothing and electronic stores, and other premises, including libraries, playgrounds and outdoor gyms and places of worship. We'll stop all gatherings of more than 2 people in public, excluding people you live with. And we'll stop all social events, including weddings, baptisms and other ceremonies.
It won't take long to see the claims made by the McGowan government that the amendments were necessary, as he said, to help implement things like mask mandates, yet that bill contained extremely overreaching provisions allowing a declared COVID-19 officer to break and enter into people's homes without a warrant if they felt it would prevent the spread of COVID. And by comparison with the UK PCSC Act claiming to contain lock-on offences, yet it also contains overreaches by implementing stop and search laws with law-abiding citizens when the police feel like it. But it doesn't stop there by comparison. About 4 days ago, I saw the following tweet, which I found of particular interest, so I decided to investigate the subject matter a little further. In the UK, there is a bill that's called the Public Order Bill 2022, and it's about to have its first reading in the House of Lords, in fact last Thursday. Just to be clear, I am talking about the UK here, not Australia. Well, not yet. Just a brief look at this bill brought on an alarmingly deep level of concern for me. Why? Well, it's because it will essentially make protesting on any level unlawful. In addition, the UK bill will give the police the ability, with what's proposed and will be known as a Serious Disruption Prevention Order or an SDPO, to be issued on a person. And that person doesn't need to be charged or convicted in order to receive an SDPO. All that is required is police just need to make an application to a magistrate's court that that person, a UK citizen, is likely to cause disruption to 2 or more people in a public place. That's it. Once an SDPO is made, it will be in force for 5 years. Any breach will be determined on the balance of probability, the civil burden of proof being significantly lower than the criminal burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt, which is needed to secure a criminal conviction. Breaches will see 2-year imprisonment sentences with massive fines, and in some instances unlimited fines have been set. A person subject to an SDPO may also be required to wear an electronic monitoring ankle bracelet for one of the 5-year terms of the order. Here in Australia, we fall under the Westminster system of law, based on the British model of responsible. Well, at least that's the bulk of the politicians, what they say they employ, responsible governing, which could apply to any state, territory or federal level. Under this system, public sector employees are meant to serve the people of their state and territory and nation by implementing West Australian or Australian government policies, decisions and programs in the best interest of the people, not that of a World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, or even United Nations. As the best fit is not a blanket approach by these organisations, as Australians, we have never voted for those that head these organisations, yet their influence in our democracy is becoming more and more intrusive. We have all lived the fallout of the pandemic over the past near 3 years and felt the impact of non-elected bureaucrats' decisions that amounted to serious breaches of basic human rights, with government, WEF, WHO and UN overreach, a far cry from responsible governing. However, the memories of the above will fall into small comparison if a bill like the UK Public Order Bill 2022 comes to pass in Australia. There would be many instances in conversations over the past 3 years where one person with another has been talking about points of view of government, potentially government overreach and infractions against human rights, likely ending with one person saying, "It's time to wake up before it's too late." Therefore, in Australia, we cannot ignore the trends in the UK, as it may be the best signal for what may potentially be coming down the pipeline. That is, unless you truly believe that laws like or similar to the Public Order Bill 2022 will not make their ways in the corridors of WA or Australian Parliament. Here's one last look at a trend that I want to bring up to you. On a web page called Our World Data, you will find many graphs and stats highlighting trends relating to governments around the globe and their management of COVID-19. This graph shows a graphical representation of COVID-19 stringency measures between Australia and the UK regarding injection mandates, travel bans, lockdowns, business and school closures, and banning of public and private events. When you look closely, you'll see that Australia followed UK trends very closely indeed, except for the past 12 months. And I'd suggest to you, when you look even closer again, you'll see the comparative period from June 2021 to March 2022, Australia experienced more stringent controls in some places by nearly double compared to the UK. The stringency index peaking at its highest in Australia when we experienced some of the largest protest rallies held ever. So ask yourself this: if the UK government has seen fit to pass a law like the PCSC Act in October 2021 when its stringency index was falling, while recently in Western Australia Premier McGowan pushed hard for and passed the Emergency Management Act amendments, you may well by now sense the trend that I'm seeking to highlight. Trends don't just need to be graphs and statistics. When we look to history, some of the most important trends regarding outcomes of the journey for democracy and the fight for freedoms are far from feel good. The main side effect of mainstream media's complicit role in failing to highlight pieces of proposed government legislation, especially in light where such legislation really challenges the very fabric of how a true democracy could possibly be maintained with such draconian laws, is why we can no longer rely on mainstream media messaging. But can people really continue to remain silent on such matters anymore? To answer that question, I am going to turn to history. In fact, something that Martin Luther King Jr. said. And he said the following:
all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
I'm Lindsay from Freedom Media WA, and to those that have commented